Scott left me notes. I think it's a cheat sheet. I'm not exactly sure what I'm supposed to do with it. Joy Sunday. It's Joy Sunday. Are you feeling the joy? Yes. Are you? Great. Great. That means you all been out Christmas shopping and pushing and shoving and all that good stuff? No Christmas shopping?
Yes.
Way to go. Yeah, I decided Mary had enough stuff this year and she wasn't going to get anything either, so we're good. It's Joy Sunday, and they plunked this one just before Love Sunday, and then 2 weeks from today, it's Christmas. So here we are at Joy, trying to figure it all out, and we have joy here among us. We have Shirley and Linda here with us. We haven't seen them in a bit. We have Tori's adoption coming up near the end of this week. We have all kinds of joy that's happening. We have Gay here. We have Deb here. And we have all the rest of us here too. Unless you want me to name you all, I'll just kind of say all the rest of us. And what I like about this reading is, and Shirley and I think, are still the only two ex-nuns here. But we used to say every day when we were in the convent, the Magnificat during Vespers. Is that right? And so that was the reading that we had today. My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior. Isn't it wonderful to say that prayer every day? You know, we all can say that prayer every day. We all can say that prayer every day. My spirit rejoices in God. For God has looked with favor on God's lowly servant. I kind of feel like God's lowly servant. I actually have most of my life. Because God just takes the lowly servants and raises them all up. And we don't have to be somebody rich or famous or important, because God raises up all God's servants. And Mary prays, from now on, all generations will call me blessed, and we do. For the Mighty One has done great things for me, and holy is God's name. Wow, I can't imagine being her age and being able to think these thoughts. I'm not saying that she wrote these words or said these words. I'm not saying that, this is the blue letter version. I don't know what that really is, where it's supposedly exactly the way people said things. Not so much. But to have these thoughts as a young woman, pregnant with God's child. God's mercy is for those who stand in awe of God from generation to generation. That's where we stand. We stand in awe of all the things God has done and is working here with us and among us. Think of all the good stuff that's happened to us as Faith family, even just this year. Even just this year. We've had new folks come in. We have people who continue to come in. We're so happy to have that. We're happy to have our visitors. We're happy to have all of us coming back on Sunday morning to be filled with what will carry us through a week where others sometimes drain our energy, sometimes even drain our grace. But that's okay, because God fills us and refills us and continues to fill us no matter what. God has shown strength and scattered the proud in their conceit. I always liked this line. Cheryl, I don't know if you did, but I liked saying this line because I thought, all those people that kind of walk around all puffed up, full of themselves, are going to end up in the same place the rest of us end up. In God's little group of beloved children, here and beyond. And no matter who you think you are today, you are no greater or no lesser than all the people you see around you. We are all part of God's one human family. And that's God has been telling us this for generations. God has filled the hungry with good things. Think about all the efforts we've made this year to help that be reality for other people. we fill ourselves with good things. I understand there's some great stuff out there for hospitality today. Mimi, was that you that baked or somebody else in the family? All of you, all right. See, those are the kind of new folks you want in church. They're here. And they're about the baking. That's a good thing. But there's something about filling ourselves with good things. You know, it's different if I'm just making brownies for me than if I'm making brownies to come here. There's something different about that. Next week we celebrate Christmas dinner. There's something different about making that meal to share with one another here than it is to just sit home and pop a hungry man dinner in the oven, which is what I do when Mary's not here. You know, not quite the same thing. And then we've gone out of our way to find new ways to fill God's hungry with new things. Those who hunger for food, those who hunger for a hot meal. On every Sunday that we have family dinner, home-cooked food goes home for people who maybe don't have homes or have not had a hot meal. We've had the No Judgment Zone food pantry since we started this congregation. This year we gave away free hot dogs. Who knows who needed that plus that day? We're always finding ways to feed the hungry, but then we need to feed the hunger, those who hunger and thirst for justice, those who hunger and thirst to know God in new ways, in ways that speak to their hearts and souls, that fill them up and not tear them down. So we never speak of God in ways that show a God of condemnation or judgment, a damning God. That's not the God we know. The God we know is the one who created us, and we're beautiful, and we're God's beloved. And that's not a God that's going to take us and throw us away. No matter what anybody says, that's not happening. And it says in the next line that God has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty. You know what? I really wonder about that phrase, sent the rich away empty. I don't think God sends anybody away empty. I think sometimes we leave empty because we choose to. But I don't think that's in God's plan, that anybody should be sent away empty. No matter who you are, God wants you full of God's love. But if you choose to close the portals of your heart and not allow that in, that's your choice. And God's never going to wrench them open and make you accept love that you don't want. But I don't think God sends us away empty. I think we may wander away empty. The good thing is God loves it when we wander back. Ask a wanderer. I want to share with you a story that I think speaks to this. It's a little bit long. I'll try to condense it as much as I can. It's a Christmas story, supposedly a true story, using real names. The year was 1931 and work was hard to come by. I was 20 years old and counted myself fortunate to have found work in a small factory where I met the pirate. That is what he called himself, and he looked and acted the part. He wore a black patch that covered his right eye. There were 30 of us who worked there, and we were all subjected to the pirate's meanness 6 days a week. The pirate had a name for everyone. The names were all derogatory and based on what the pirate saw as a defect. Well, we all have defects, so I mean, I can imagine what the pirate would be calling me, and each of us can imagine what the pirate would be calling each of us. The name he gave me was Worm. It all started out as Bookworm when he saw me reading during my lunch hour. Wasn't long before he shortened it to Worm, and I love to read, so he always saw me doing that, so now my name became Worm. One day the pirate came up to me as I was moving some boxes and said, "You are one very sick-in-the-head person, you garbage worm. Go crawl in the dirt." He walked away laughing. We tolerated this stuff from the pirate because we needed work. When the pirate was out of hearing range, there was plenty that was said about it. But nobody told him directly, because you would be fired on the spot in what the pirate called walking the plank. One worker named Fred, who the pirate called Screwball, was out of work for 2 days. And when he came back, the pirate asked him where he'd been. And when he told him he'd been out because his brother had died, the pirate looked at him and bellowed, "Your brother, not you, so you should have been there." Fred said nothing. I was quiet too. I needed work. I continued reading Kierkegaard. I don't know if anybody's read Kierkegaard. I had been fed up with some institutionalized religion and its hypocrisy, and Kierkegaard resonated with me. He wrote about the power of love and how about being a Christian was more than adopting a label or attending a church. Through his writings, he became my teacher. There was a dilemma about this for me because my feelings for the pirate were anything but love. In fact, there were times when I hated the pirate. There were times when I wanted to pummel him. I controlled myself, but the hatred was growing inside me, and it contradicted what I had been learning. I'd been working at the factory for about 8 months. One day, after several gruesome encounters with the pirate, I sat in my small room weeping. I had had enough. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to do something. I had searched for work elsewhere, but with no luck. And if I left, it would most likely mean living on the street. I had no one. Both of my parents had died years before, and I had been fending for myself for the last 4 years. In my despair, I sought solace in the New Testament. I opened it at random. Anybody ever do that? Open it at random and see what Spirit wants to say? I opened it at random and my eyes fell on this page, Matthew 5, verse 44. I say unto you, any Baptists in here that can quote it? We former Catholics can't, that's what I ask. Love your enemies. Bless those that curse you. Do good to those that hate you. And pray for those who despitefully use you and persecute you. The following day during lunch, I sat in the warehouse reading Kierkegaard's Either Or. The pirate passed by and bellowed, "What are you reading, worm?" When I showed him the title, he laughed. Either or what? Either you respect the pirate or you walk the plank. I wondered what could turn a person into a man like the pirate. And I returned to my reading. Once again, words jumped out at me. Perhaps he sighs at the thought that he is loved by nobody and does not reflect that he is loved by God, wrote Kierkegaard. That night when I prayed for the pirate. The idea of what I was to do germinated in my sleep. I woke in the middle of the night, and there it was. 4 weeks later, on Christmas Eve, the factory shut down an hour early. The factory owner, who I'd never seen before, showed up and passed out a turkey to every worker. After he left, most of the workers sat around tables drinking punch, heavily spiked with rum. We would never do that. The pirate was far off from everyone else, counting stacked boxes. I decided this was the opportunity that I needed. I walked to where he was and stopped and turned to look at, and he turned to look at me. What is it? Don't worms like punch? I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small box. It was wrapped in plain brown paper. Merry Christmas, pirate. He took it in his hand and stood silent, as if puzzled. What's this? He said it loudly, loud enough so that the men sitting drinking punch quieted their conversations and looked toward us. I spoke softly. It's a gift. The pirate got louder. A gift? What is this? Some kind of joke? Won't be funny when you walk the plank. I turned to walk away and he shouted at me, "Halt, worm." He tore off the paper and looked at the box. "Some kind of joke, worm?" I said nothing. He opened the box slowly and took out the pocket watch. It had cost me more than a week's pay, and I wondered if he would fling it or toss it on the floor and step on it. But he didn't. Instead, he raised his voice. "What's this? A broken watch?" "No. Open it." The pirate pressed at the pin on top of the watch and it sprung open. The jeweler had inscribed, "The Pirate, 12/24/31. God loves you." I started to walk away. The pirate let loose a stream of profanities, ending with, "Are you crazy?" I turned to face him. "No, I'm a Christian." We both stood silent. Then I noticed it. It started as a tiny tear dripping from his left eye. It grew into a stream. I stepped towards him and reached out to shake his hand, but he just stood there. I stepped closer. "I'm sorry," I murmured. And then I hugged him. At first, he just stood there limp, as his tears flowed onto my shoulder. Then he lifted his arms and wrapped them around me and cried like a baby. I held him as he whispered through his tears, "I'm really sorry." I held him tighter, and I whispered, "It's okay. God loves you." When I stepped back, he stood a moment, then he turned and walked away. On the next workday, the pirate was pretty quiet and stayed that way all week. Midway through the week, he started to yell at Fred, "Hey, Screwball!" But Fred cut him short. "Hey, pirate, what time is it?" The pirate reached in his pocket, pulled out the watch, gave Fred the time, and walked away. Fred's method was used by others. The weeks passed, and the pirate grew gentler. When a worker returned after being out for a day, the pirate asked where he'd been. When he said he'd been really sick, the pirate said, "I hope you feel better." It was a Sunday in early March of 1932. I was walking through the park when I noticed the pirate sitting on a bench, breaking off pieces of bread and feeding them to the pigeons. He had not noticed me. He sat there talking to the pigeons. "It's okay. There's plenty more. Share." When he did notice me, he looked embarrassed. I sat down next to him. "It's okay, pirate. St. Francis talked to the birds too." He continued to feed the birds. "I'm far from being a saint. I don't even go to church." And he handed me a chunk of bread. "Pirate, you're in church." I started to bite into the bread and he stopped me. "Not for you, for birds." I joked with him. "You know, they might eat me. Birds eat worms." He giggled. "You know, worm, you think a lot." I returned to the park the following Sunday. There he was sitting on the same bench feeding the pigeons. It was on this day that he told me how he had become the pirate. His mother had died when he was 10. His father, who had a taste for liquor and a mean streak, had taken to drinking more heavily after his wife's death. The pirate had a sister who was 4 years older. When she was 15, she received a severe beating from their father, left home, and took to selling her body on the street. The pirate loved animals. When he was 14, he found a stray puppy on the street and fed it half of his sandwich. It was a few days before Christmas. The puppy followed him home, and he pleaded with his father to let him keep the puppy. His father reluctantly agreed. On Christmas Eve, his father drank himself into a stupor. When the puppy went on the floor, the father got up, and you can imagine what happened. The pirate tried to get between his father and the puppy, and his father picked up a whiskey bottle and smashed it across the pirate's face. That's how he lost his right eye. When he left the hospital, he was put in a children's home. He ran away after 2 days, and the factory owner found him sleeping in a back doorway of the factory and took him in. That was 26 years ago, and the pirate had worked there ever since. I continued to meet the pirate in the park on Sunday for the next 6 months. We became friends. Then in September of '32, I left for the West Coast. During our last Sunday in the park, the pirate handed me what looked like a book wrapped in plain brown paper. I started to open it, and he said, "Save it for the train ride." I thanked him, and we shook hands, and he put his other hand on my shoulder. "You know, Worm, I don't really know who I am anymore." There were tears in his eyes. I put my hand on his shoulder and said, "I think you'll figure it out." While on the train the next day, I removed the wrapping. It was a leather-bound copy of Kierkegaard's The Concept of Dread. There was a handwritten inscription, "Thank you, the pirate." 6 months later, I received a postcard. It said, "I'm not much of a writer. Hope all is well. I wrote him once, and we lost touch." I returned east in '42, married and with a child. And the day before Christmas, I decided to pay a visit to the old factory and the pirate. When I arrived, I was greeted by Fred. I asked where the pirate was, and he said, "Jim died 3 months ago. He spent most of his free time with his kids until he took ill a few months before he died." I asked if Jim had gotten married. "No, but he called them his kids. They were the kids at the children's home, Jim's children's home. Jim had worked for years and lived pretty frugally. He had a home built just for those kids. You should see it." I did. I went to the home on my way home. It was a large house, and the sign outside read, "Jim Muldoon's Home for Children." I must have been noticed. A man came to the door and asked if he could help me. I told him I had been a friend of Jim's, and he invited me in. I noticed a large portrait of the pirate on the wall. As we spoke, a boy who looked about 14 came in. He had a long scar stretching across the side of his face. He shook my hand and said, "Mr. Jim saved my life. Best person I ever met." The manager told me Jim was survived by a sister and told me where she lived. So I went to visit her, and she asked me who I was when she opened the door, and I said, "I'm Jim's friend." She said, "Come on in. Jim told me about you." We sat at the kitchen table drinking tea and talking of her brother. She got up, walked into another room, and came back with the pocket watch. "Jim would have wanted you to have this. He used to say that he had been frozen in time until you gave him the watch." She placed it in my hand, and I opened it and read the inscription. She told me how Jim had helped her out of her life and helped her turn it around. He wanted nothing in return. Towards the end, when he got sick, he even made his own arrangements, picked out his own headstone, and the inscription on it. She told me where the cemetery was. I took a bus. It began to snow, the wind had picked up and the snow was sticking to the headstones. I wondered if I would find his name. I did, and knelt beside it to pray as the snow continued to fall. The lower part of his headstone was covered with snow. I brushed it off, and the epitaph was a quote from Kierkegaard. I am, as it were, an agent in the service of the highest. I am, as it were, an agent in the service of the highest. If we go back to the reading from Luke that we began with today, the very first words are, my soul magnifies the Lord. Now I thought about that, and I thought, what the heck does that mean, my soul magnifies the Lord? My soul makes God bigger? And I thought, you know what, that's probably not theologically correct, but I'm going to go with it. Because I think it's true. I think it's true in this story about the pirate, and about the guy who touched him, and about all the people we touch and are touched by us. I think today's message, whether it's the pirates, or Mary's, or God's, is that all of our souls are here to magnify the Lord. This is Joy Sunday, because in magnifying the Lord, that's where we find our joy. That's where we find our joy. And so my prayer for all of us this day is, may our souls this day and all days magnify the Lord.